Time with Michelle Van, where we talk about health, wealth, and spirituality. Today, we are here and we are doing a COVID follow up. Shayla, tell us who you are and what you do in the world.
So I'm Shayla. I am currently work as an LPN. I do travel nursing. I've worked at both major hospitals in the city of Wichita. I've worked on many different floors and specialties, from oncology to skilled nursing. I've done everything in between. I'm currently finishing up my bachelor's, so that's really exciting in nursing. Um, and then we'll see what goes on from there. But I am a nurse and I love to be a nurse, honestly.
So tell us, Shayla, as you were saying, you've been all over and you worked in various places during COVID. Kind of tell us, what were you seeing? What was your experience like?
So in the beginning of COVID, things were just they just were very fluid. Everything was changing literally week by week, sometimes day by day.
Mm-hmm.
When COVID first hit, the place that they needed us the most was in the skilled nursing facilities. And that's usually like with an older population, people who are only there for a short amount of daytime. So there I would see things like first it was everybody was on lockdown. Nobody could come out of the room. We couldn't really, only nurses could go in their rooms. Family couldn't come in. It was wild the way that everything just kind of shut down at one time. Um, so that was that was when we still had the protective equipment, so it wasn't as bad. But then when we started to lose access to those resources is when
Mm-hmm.
things kind of got scary. And that's when you see like the height of COVID, when nobody people were talking to everybody from like windows, from stories down, trying to get in contact with their families. And that's when it got really crazy. But at the beginning it was kind of like a little stagnant before it kind of got to its height.
Mm-hmm. So as you think about your experience, you said families weren't able to come in, people weren't able to see their loved ones. Loved ones were sometimes, um, for lack of a better term, locked down. How did you see that affect the way people were able to interact and react?
So I feel like it really, of course, it really took a toll on the patients themselves. I mean, you were confined to a room. It was almost like, for lack of better terms, like being in a jail cell. The rooms there weren't very big. The rooms at the hospitals aren't very big. And because of COVID, even when we had shared rooms, we had to separate those rooms. On some of
Mm,
the floors, like the med surge floors, they would be shared rooms, and they are today. But at that time, we just had everybody away from everybody. So I think it really took a big toll on patients because they're at their most vulnerable times and really needing that familiar support, not only from their families, but like for social workings. Our social workers usually go in and they're talking to people, and we didn't have those outside resources. If we had people like chaplains, we didn't have chaplains, couldn't go inside of the
mm,
rooms and couldn't have those interactions with patients. And the same for nurses. It took a big toll on us just having to go through those processes and be next to patients and then deal with our own emotions. And maybe we had COVID or had at the beginning, we ourselves, like I was separated from my son for months at a time because I was working in the thick of it and I just didn't want to expose family members not knowing what it was doing or disease process at the time. So yeah, it was really hard.
And so, Shayla, as you were, going in and out of rooms and dealing with families, and the fact that they couldn't talk, but they wanted to have those video conferences. I know we had a video conference with our loved one, and as he was passing. And so, how did psychologically, how you really deal with that? How do you process that? How do you to push through that?
So I think it really pushed you, unless you were used to being in that type of environment, like unless you were some type of a hospice nurse or something like that. It kind of it pushed you out of your element a bit, because it was like, yes, we're nursing, so we do see from life becoming of life to the end of life, at some point in time during our career, it was the frequency of it happening that was different. And so, and it was happening on any floor, like on med surg floors, we're not used to seeing those critical of patients, but because those patients didn't have anywhere else to go, those patients were be on like a regular med surg floor. And so it you just kind of had to check yourself. You had to check yourself every day before you walked into that into onto your shift, into that different room. And then it was just it was hard to have to stay in there for those conversations or be in there. Maybe I couldn't leave this patient because this person, and you're not trying to rush family members, but somebody else was probably waiting for that iPad to have the same conversation. And that in itself was just really hard. And it's probably as hard on the nurses as it was on the patients, to be honest, especially since you didn't have that break in between patients so that I could take a breath and so that I
Mhm.
could process what was happening, so that I can process this death, because I've been taking care of this patient for the last week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month. And now I've gotten attached to this patient, and maybe I thought they were going to get better. And then I seen that decline. So now I have to deal with the family's feelings, the patient's feelings, and before I can deal with my own feelings, I'm right back in the same situation next door. So yeah, that was it was a really really trying time.
As we're thinking about, we processed through, we got through those years, and I think Renee made a point. COVID never left. It just wasn't the conversation that everybody was having every day, but it never left. What are you seeing now in the hospitals?
Now we're still seeing COVID patients. And like she said, I think that people just maybe thought that it just went away just because it wasn't as prominent. But we still see COVID patients. And especially now that we're entering into this RSV flu season, and it's kind of becoming like one of those diseases that you see during this time along with the flu season. It's one of those respiratory diseases that I think that we're going to see. So we've had like small influx of it. And I know that I remember reading in the news, Canada had quite an influx of COVID that just
Mm-hmm.
washed over that nation not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
So like she said, just taking those precautions. I myself, I felt a little under the weather just last week. And I just took out of courtesy, not only for myself, but to others, to make sure that I was wearing a mask and making sure that I was carrying hand sanitizer and keeping others safe, because it's not just about you. It's not just about how COVID affected you. I personally had COVID and I didn't get necessarily sick from it or show those symptoms, but I know that even though I didn't show symptoms, doesn't mean that if I pass it on to somebody, it might end their life. So you need to be taking those precautions, even if you don't think you have COVID. If you have any type of those symptoms, you need to go ahead and take those precautions, because we're still seeing it. We're still seeing patients go into respiratory failure over it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you're not just because it's not as prominent doesn't mean that it's not happening.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So as we're thinking about going into the winter, because we're not in winter yet, it's getting cool, but it's not, as cold as it's going to be. What should we be doing? What things should people be doing to stay aware, be aware, raise their immunity? What things should people be doing?
So I think it just goes along what people are into. I obviously I deal with medicine. I am not against medicine. I'm not against vaccines. I actually think people should get their vaccines. The number one thing that anybody can do is make sure that you're washing your hands. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, as small as of a task, and people are just like, I mean, you'll see people that go like this. No, you really need to be scrubbing your hands for 20 seconds and making sure that you yourself are getting that bacteria off from your hands to your mouth, from your hands to your eyes, to your hands to any of your mucous membranes, including it to your kids. You have to make sure that you're doing hand hygiene. If your hands are visibly soiled, or if you just got done touching some type of a surface that may have been soiled, instead of wiping on your clothes, wash your hands if you can, as opposed to using alcohol based. hand sanitizer. That's going to be the best thing for you. And of course, if you're in an area where you feel like um, a lot of people are going to be sick, or if you're in some type of a close quarters type of environment, making sure that you're wearing that mask, or like if you feel sick, making sure that you're wearing a mask. If you're on any type of a medication where you feel like your immune system might be compromised, there's some medicines out there that do that for you. And one of them, I don't know if a lot of people know, is birth control. Birth control can do that for you. If you're on
Wow.
any fertility drugs, like if you're trying to get pregnant, a lot of those fertility drugs can do that for you, can lower your immune system, or being pregnant itself can also put your immune system at risk. So making sure that if you're in those big environments, if you're going to concerts, if you're going to some type of thing where you're really close to a lot of people, and this type of, as you said, like we're moving into that weather, or that time of season where RSV.
Some time with me tonight to really kind of have this conversation around COVID and where we were, where we are, and where we're going. And well, how do we know that there's COVID? Well, because they're testing fecal matter every day. They're testing the waste that is happening in communities, and they know when there's a spike. They know when we're going through a new strand. They know when things are changing. And so I just advise you, I truly believe what you just said, know your body, know, where your nutrients is, eat good, eat the colors of the rainbow. Your plate shouldn't all be brown and white. So the more colors we eat, the more vitamins we're getting into our bodies, the better we'll feel. So we thank you. We appreciate all of you. We